In this video article, we're going to look at level 5 of Gary Provost's 5-level novel structure. And level 5 is about actions, which are sentence-level movements. Before we start, if you want to get an email with a time-stamped overview every time I release a new video, then simply head over to my website, deliberate-practice.com, sign up for my email list. There's some other content there. All of the videos that I've uploaded to YouTube are there. Plus, I'll be adding some thank you goodies for signing up, and so there'll be some stuff there, and I'll talk more about those in other videos. Okay, let's start with level 5 actions, which is sentence level movement. So actions are the smallest unit of story movement. If you look at story in terms of building blocks, actions create scenes which can have swings applied to them, which we looked in the last video in this series. Then groups of scene form sequences, and those sequences link together to form a longer form piece of fiction, a novel. But even when you're thinking about actions, ideally every sentence must earn its place and move the story forward and not just sit there on the page, not advancing the story. There are 4 principal types of actions. There's physical, that's concrete, observable movement by characters through the story space. There's positional, that's change in spatial arrangement and character positioning. There's gestural, that's non-verbal communications, either body language or facial expressions. And there's verbal, which is obviously dialogue. We'll look at each of these in some more detail. So the first of those is physical actions. So moving, if you described a character as walking into a room, that's the action for that sentence. Interacting with objects. You could describe a character by saying, or an action by saying, she opened the letter with trembling fingers. So not only do you get a physical action, which is opening the letter, you also get an implication as to the character's mental state with the trembling fingers. Obviously, that would depend on the context around the scene. Combat or conflict. So this is either confrontation or resistance. So he grabbed her, it's confrontation. She pushed him away, that's resistance. So they're both physical actions which affect the story. And then narrative functions. You can also create scene transitions, reveal character, build tension, advance plot with physical actions. The second type of action you can use is positional. So seating and standing, and there are different types of these which we're going to go through. So seating and standing can establish power dynamics and or comfort levels. So if you wrote he sat down, she remained standing, you've got 2 actions there, but the relationship between the first character sitting down and the second character standing up also implies something in terms of their character dynamic. Proximity. Physical distance between characters can mirror or contrast emotional distance. So she moved closer to him. So how you can use this technique, if she moved closer to him in a scene like a romantic scene, we might be expecting her to move closer to him and maybe they kiss. But maybe if you're writing some kind of psychological thriller, and you wrote she moved closer to him, the hand holding the knife behind her back was clenched firmly around the dagger's hilt, or something like that. We've got the physical distance. This way contrasts the emotional distance between them because they're getting closer physically, but this character obviously doesn't like / wants to harm the character that she's moving close to. Orientation actions shows where the characters are paying attention. So if you wrote he looked towards the window, depending on what's happening around him, that can have its own implications. Either he's tuning out from someone talking to him, or something's happening outside and he's looking out of the window to see what that is. Again, it's an action, and so what the character is paying attention to becomes a positional action. And then finally, positional actions can show relationship dynamics. So this is similar to proximity, but physical position can reflect remote emotional dynamics. So if you want to show 2 characters as being very close to each other emotionally, you can mirror that with being very close to each other physically as well. And by the same token, if something's happening and let's say they're having an argument, the characters could move further apart to mirror that change in their relationship dynamic. The third type of action, gestural actions, hand and arms. So express emotion and emphasis. So if you write, he folded his arms, she waved dismissively, both of those actions signify something. You have characters, I don't know if you watch what I'm doing in the little corner of the video, but I'm often doing something with my hand. I find when I'm talking, I'm always moving my hands. So you can use that kind of movement or the lack of that kind of movement to indicate various things about the characters you're writing about. Facial is another kind of gestural actions, can show immediate emotional responses. So if a character says to another character, I love you, and the second character smiles, that's a completely different reaction, or a completely different emotional response rather than if the second character, when being told I love you, starts to cry or starts to laugh. So the facial action can be used both to confirm what we expect or to flip it on its head somehow. Posture and bearing, this can be used to communicate confidence levels and attitudes. Not one that you probably would use a massive amount, but it can be used. And then you can use gestural actions to create subtext. And gestural actions can sometimes convey more than dialogue about emotion and intent. So you can use those actions to do that. And when you mix gestural actions with dialogue, you can create quite rich scenes without spelling everything out for the reader. So dialogue is obviously the fourth type of action, so verbal actions. You can have direct communication, e.g., I'm talking to you, the meeting's going to be at 3 o'clock this afternoon. That's a very direct communication. In screenwriting terms, that would be called on the nose dialogue. And ideally, you don't write much on the nose dialogue because it's very flat. It doesn't contain anything that will create tension or reveal subtext or anything like that. So ideally, you avoid direct communication, and if you have to convey stuff like that, you convey that in a different manner. You can use verbal actions for subtext and implications. That's communication carrying a deeper meaning. Again, this one thing on its own, subtext in dialogue, could be a 30-minute workshop style video all on its own. So the people who I think are really good at talking about subtext with dialogue particularly are screenwriters. So there's a bunch of good screenwriting interviews that you'll find on YouTube that you can go and have a look at. And there are some great screenwriting books as well that you can refer to, which may give you more information on how to go about using subtext with dialogue. You can also express emotional feelings with your speech patterns. Again, that's tending towards being a bit on the nose, and I've learned from a lot of screenwriters, as in reading books, listening to interviews, going to workshops and stuff, and one thing they all agree on pretty much is on the nose dialogue is to be avoided wherever possible. So if you have a character say I love you, have something else be happening, so it's not just a straight oh I love you and it's all happy and sparkly rainbows and stuff. What you want is something else to be happening so that the dialogue has some subtext. And then finally, you can use dialogue that reveals character, changes relationships, move the story forward. A guy whose writing is not as well known as I think it should be is screenwriter William Goldman. I'll do a video in the future on some of his books. He is fabulous with dialogue. One of my favourite books for looking at dialogue is a book of his called Magic, and it's about a character who's called Corky, if I remember correctly. And he's a magician, and his magic career is not going very well until he introduces a foul-mouthed ventriloquist dummy called Fats. And the exchanges between Corky and Fats and members of the audience and stuff. Fats is a fantastic character, and his dialogue is brilliant, and all the dialogue in that story is really great. It's a reasonably small book. I think it's available on Kindle for like $3 or something like that. So if you need a book to check out some dialogue, and it's a really if you like psychological thrillers with kind of like a little bit of a horror twist, that might be up your alley if you've not read that already. Okay, Gary has a thing to use when we're thinking about actions called the new information principle, and that is every sentence must advance the story, and that's either by plot information, so you get new facts, you get developments, you get revelation or increased/evolving conflict. It's by character information, either personality revelation, background discovery or relationship development, or emotional information, changes in feeling or relationship dynamics between characters. So notice there's nothing there about flowery description or anything like that, or setting. Setting is something that you have to weave in. And when I was asked about setting by somebody, I suggested that setting isn't what something looks like, it's what it looks like to the character. So how the character describes that setting suggests something about their mental state, about what they're going through, those kind of things. So every sentence needs to advance the story. If it just sits there and it doesn't move the story forward, but it contains a piece of information that you need to rework that sentence and rework that piece of information so it goes into a sentence where there's some movement. Building momentum with actions. Individual actions build together to create increasing story drive. Each action should increase scene tension progressively, obviously until the scene is resolved. Actions can reveal more about character with each sentence. And physical actions can show evolving character connections. So physical actions show how two characters or more than two characters, how their relationship's changing much more effectively for the audience than verbal communication. So physical actions and gestural actions. So do look to expand your palette of actions beyond the simple ones and think about gestural actions, and use those as well as verbal dialogue actions, and use physical actions to underscore all of that. You can also use actions to control pacing. If you want fast pacing, you'd use lots of short actions. That's like chase scenes, fights, crisis moments, those kinds of scenes. If you want medium pacing, which is kind of like balanced action and some description, you'd use it for character development, relationship building. You'd have longer actions rather than lots of short actions. So you have longer actions and probably longer reactions, whereas in a fight sequence, if you want fast pacing, maybe a character would throw a punch and the other character reacts, and the throwing the punch, the reaction and the back and forth, lots of short, sharp sparring actions. Whereas in other scenes where you don't need that kind of fast, jagged pacing, the actions can be slightly longer, and so can the reactions. And then you can also have slow pacing where you have even fewer actions. This can be used for contemplative moments, atmospheric scenes. Although, remember that every sentence needs to move the story forward. Now, I've got the wrong heading up there. Gary's approach suggests using actions is for post-writing analysis, and you use it to improve scenes and improve your pacing during the revision process. That's totally valid. I think he also thinks you should just write your first draft, get the words on paper, and then you can apply this kind of thinking, plus the swings that we looked at in level 4 in the previous video, to the work you've got on paper. I've got a slightly different take on this, and my contention is you can learn elements like this with deliberate practice, and when you're writing your first draft, and if you're writing in flow, these will start showing up in your writing. And yes, of course, you still need to revise afterwards, and you still need to structure things, and you may need to go, this sentence here, this is flat, it's not advancing anything. If I take that piece of information out and put it in this sentence, that compresses the amount of words and puts the information into a more active setting. You'll still need to do some of that. But if you understand deliberate practice, and you understand how to practice something so you've practiced it to the point of unconscious competence, then these kind of things should show up in your writing. And that's whether you're a discovery writer or an outlining style writer. I'm going to be talking more about how you use deliberate practice to improve as a fiction writer in future videos, so watch out for those. But I believe you can do this, and that belief is backed up by teaching various tasks to musicians, and obviously they're not writing tasks, but things that they thought were impossible to do, but with the right teaching and, more importantly, the right practice guidance, so that they can learn it, so they get to that point of unconscious competence, they surprise themselves and been able to do things that they never thought were possible. I think that's the same with writing. I'll be talking more about that in future videos. So, closing out this series about Gary and his video novel workshop, don't forget to download the videos for the workshop while you can. I don't know how long they'll be up for. Today is, I'm useless with dates, as I've said in previous videos. Today is Saturday the 19th of July. As far as I know, you can still get them from the link that will be in the description below. At some stage that may change. If that does, it's out of my control. I can't do anything about it. But if you can get them and listen to them all and make notes, there's a lot of great information in this series. And the best writing process for you is your writing process. So you don't have to take everything Gary lays out as gospel. You can take what works for you and you can discard or replace the rest. If you only find one thing that you can add to your process that makes your writing better, then that process has been worthwhile. I like the analogy that Thomas Edison used when he was trying to find the element that would work for light bulbs, and he tried lots of different metals, several hundred, and one of his colleagues said, "Aren't you a bit concerned about all these failures?" And he said, "They're not failures. I've discovered things that don't work, so I never have to try them again." If you adapt and adopt that mentality to your writing, try things. If they don't work, discard them. Remember that they don't work for you, and until you grow as a writer, and you may need to reach for those tools again, depending on what they are, you know they don't work for you, so find something that does work for you. That's the hardest job for writers, by the way, to find their own writing process. So it's worthwhile studying different writing teachers and trying to take things and ideas that you resonate with and bringing them into your writing process. So hopefully you'll download Gary's video novel workshop, and you'll find a bunch of stuff in that workshop that you can add to your process and lift your overall process, so it brings your writing up. If you've got any questions or comments on that, you can email me at paul@deliberate-practice.com, and don't forget you can sign up for the email list where you'll get a notification for all these videos at deliberate-practice.com. And I've also got my resource, the writing-vault.com. That link will be in the description below this video. If you're an aspiring or frustrated fiction writer, I'm putting a bunch of things together. It grows nearly every day, and you may find lots of material that will help you and guide you within the writing vault. Go and check the page out. If you've got questions on that, just use the email address and fire off an email to me and I'll answer as soon as I can. So thank you for watching this series of videos, and don't forget to download the video novel workshop of Gary's while you can, and I'll catch you in the next video.